Hi, Sam. How are you?
Hi, Feroz. Great. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to be a guest on Drag and Drop. I know we've known each other for a while now, so it's nice to finally have you on.
Yeah, thanks a lot. No, you've certainly been a part of our story as well. So we appreciate that and excited to get a chance here to share with the community.
Amazing. Well, it'd be good to start with, a bit about yourself, you kind of, your background, how you've ended up in Eswatini, a bit of background around that.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. Initially, didn't get into the software industry, but was working as a diesel engine design engineer in the US. And then 2017 had the privilege of moving to Eswatini, Africa, where I've been since and just joining this incredible team at the Luke Commission, really, really moving the needle on what it looks like to innovate solutions for the underserved. And so I've been with the team, just solving problems and helping out, here in the last almost a decade now, but getting a chance to do a lot of software development and systems development in that process.
Yeah. And, obviously, like you said, you moved from the States to Eswatini, that type of opportunity doesn't just come up like that for people, right? How did that kind of arise? How did that kind of come on your radar?
Yeah, I'd actually, when I was at university, I had seen the founders who also went to the same university raising funds for the Miracle Campus, and so I had known a little bit about the organization. Was in a tech industry myself, and so didn't follow the medical side of it super closely. But then, fast forward a few years later, and long story short, ended up meeting my wife online, who
Wow.
was serving at the Luke Commission at the time, and so we've been able to get married in Eswatini, had our kids in Eswatini. Eswatini is home for us now. So, yeah, it's been an exciting journey, both in the journey to Eswatini and also what's happened since.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great that, that journey's kind of become part of your personal life, which is really, really nice thing to kind of look back on one day when you're kind of maybe, just resting, it'd be nice to kind of look back and see that
Someday.
journey brought so much. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, talking about the Luke Commission, for those who have not heard about the Luke Commission, it'd be nice for you to just give us a bit of a, background to, what's the Luke Commission? What's their mission?
Yeah, so the Luke Commission provides comprehensive quality healthcare, largely to underserved communities in Eswatini. And they're unique in the fact that they both have an on-site specialty care and surgical center. So, a lot of specialty operations, cataract surgeries, cornea transplants, hip replacements, knee replacements, a lot of specialty services that you otherwise can't get in the region. But on top of that, the team is also doing mobile healthcare services all throughout the country. And so, reaching thousands of communities that otherwise wouldn't have access to care and treatment, and, doing so, at a highly subsidized rate, or free of charge for many patients who otherwise wouldn't have access. So, a large number of services, over 40 services that are provided. But I think one thing that's unique is the posture of compassion that exists in this team is unlike anything else that you've ever experienced. And so, while patients recognize the quality of the healthcare they receive, they also really appreciate the manner of compassion and the posture in which they're treated. And so, that's just a really exciting, high energy team to work with. Absolutely pushing for solutions, just relentless pursuit of excellence. And from a systems perspective, just a ton of fun to work alongside team members that want to get better every day and finding ways to do it for the vulnerable and the underserved.
Yeah. And when you moved over, kind of what sparked, the digital transformation journey? What kind of were you going through the way you think, okay, you thought, or everyone within the Luke Commission thought, okay, we need to look at a solution that's going to kind of help us, go forward.
Yeah, it really started, in many cases, just out of necessity. At the time, you were trying to figure out, how do we scale up service delivery? How do we provide, comprehensive quality healthcare? In many cases, a race against time in trying to provide prevention and treatment for HIV and for other diseases. And as we were doing so, whether it was scheduling, inventory, other types of solutions, we never really set out to try to build our own solutions. We first looked off the shelf. We tried to find solutions that would work for us. Oftentimes we ran into challenges where they were just built for different environments and they just didn't work for us. And so rather than the systems, really propelling us forward, there were, off the shelf systems that needed lots of customization, expensive to customize, slow to iterate. And the rate of the organization was just adapting so much faster that those types of solutions could support. And so, we really, with the scheduling system, we kind of, just went in there and said, how do we build scheduling software, internally, include collaboration in that, make it mobile first, easy to use. And I think bit by bit, we just had challenge, solution, and started building some momentum where, every challenge that we saw, we started saying, okay, this is much easier to just tack on to this interoperable suite than it would be to even start exploring some of those external solutions. So, is it really just very much day to day, in the grind, in the trenches with the team doing the work and saying, how do we scale service delivery as cost effectively as possible? And how do we provide the highest quality of care to the most vulnerable? Even though maybe sometimes that seems unattainable, I think we really took it upon ourselves as an entire team at the Blue Commission to say, how can we do it both better and at a lower cost?
Amazing. And obviously you're an OutSystems customer. How did kind of OutSystems come into the picture? One, you know, had you even heard of OutSystems before in low code? And then two, kind of how did they kind of come? How did you kind of hear of OutSystems?
Yeah. So during COVID, we had done a lot of advancements in our legacy architecture. We were, just developing the wards shoulder to shoulder with healthcare providers and workers. I remember standing on top of trash cans outside of patient rooms, fully dressed in PPE, and just developing solutions that we could, to save lives in the most intensive circumstances. And the team was totally sold out to doing everything they could to help the patients. And, during that time, we really built a lot of features in our ICU modules that are still being used today. And then kind of emerging out of COVID, so we had kind of increased a lot of usage there. We were approached by the Ministry of Health in Eswatini to mobilize a national vaccine digital solution that would coordinate all of the, you know, vaccine registrations online, the inventory, supply chain movements of commodities, the vaccine certificates that people would use for cross-border travel. And so we launched that. We built it in 2 weeks in our legacy architecture, and ended up scaling that solution nationally. Now, as we did that, and as we started scaling to see 300,000 patients in a year, the volume that we were seeing just could not be supported by our legacy tech stack. And, we knew that that was coming, and that was just, kind of accelerating that need. And so we started looking at solutions, looked at a lot of different, tech stacks out there. We had at the same time, businesses asking, can we license and subscribe to this software, which is very, built towards a lot of emerging markets that otherwise don't have great options available. So we were looking for something that supported multi-tenancy. We were looking for something that could really scale and support high volumes of users, but retain that very agile aspect of development that we had grown accustomed to. And so we tried, I think we tried a lot of different applications, tried building apps, tested them, piloted them, and, ended up choosing OutSystems, in the end as just, great support for multi-tenancy, excellent zero downtime deployments, being able to be in the healthcare sector where you're operating 24/7. There were some other solutions. We looked at Mendix. One of the big challenges was that, it had 1 to 2 minutes of downtime with every deployment and release. And we knew we'd be updating, 1 to 2 times a day. And in that 1 to 2 minutes, particularly in health, a lot can happen. And so it was important to us to
Yeah.
have zero downtime deployments, and OutSystems offered that. So, I remember seeing the circles and triangles and squares of the low code space when I first looked at it and just being like, this is crazy. But looking back on it now, I think we have a lot of appreciation for just how much it really helps you visualize complexity and very quickly look at things other people have developed and understand it while having the full extensibility of high code as well.
Yeah. Were you skeptical at all when you saw kind of the platform and what it could do? Did you think this was kind of too good to be true? Are they just selling me something?
Yeah, I think when I first saw it, my concern was that, we wouldn't be able to go as deep into code or as far into code as we wanted to, that it was maybe a little bit too much surface level or too abstracted. But that really didn't prove out to be true when we got into it. And, I think when it actually came down to what's the fastest way we can produce a fully workable app that's being used, maintained, iterated in production, once we started to achieve that and we saw how, easy that ineffective that could be, then that's really when it kind of, alleviated those concerns or the initial shock of the way in which we would
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. And once you adopted the platform, can you talk me through your implementation journey and what it was like for you?
Yeah. So as we started up, we kind of split our teams into a couple different domains. We had supply chain, personnel, and health. And so we started by working with a couple different agencies that had experience with OutSystems, kind of help us familiarize with the platform, the architecture, best practices, and gave us the ability to hear some different perspectives in that process as well, both from a process perspective and from an architecture perspective. And then over time, as you're aware, we ended up, working more towards internalizing several of those
Yeah.
teams. So we worked with, contractors or other individuals to work alongside our local team in Eswatini, who could, more closely adopt and understand, make site visits, really get a sense
Yeah.
and a feel for the work that was taking place. And that was important to us long term that, that anyone we brought into the team could start to synergize and share that same vision for patient care and compassion, which is what Luvelo means, with all the patients that we would serve. And so we've kind of moved towards internalizing much of that development into our own team now, and then training and capacitating new developers to grow and be a part of it.
That's amazing. And in regards to kind of the build of of what you've built, can you talk me through kind of any challenges you may have come across? Obviously you've successfully kind of built something with the platform, but every technology comes with a bit of frustration, and heartache. How can you talk me through that?
Yeah, it was I think it's probably a journey that, others could relate to, but, at first trying to move into a completely new platform while you're still going full speed in your legacy tech stack, maybe even accelerating speed in that tech stack, presents challenges just in terms of getting everything migrated and, straddling both new systems and legacy systems. But, so that was a challenge initially, just logistically. I think overall, there's always this tension in high performance low code where you always have the ability to do things very quickly. And maybe all things are possible, not all things are advisable. And so
Yeah.
finding that tension between how build for longevity, build for best long-term maintenance and best practice, not compromising that while also moving at a very fast pace, kind of really finding the right balance there and tension, I think, took us a little bit of time to settle in that we eventually found. But I think there's a lot of tools like, AI Mentor that helped us analyze
Yeah.
those things along the way. But yeah, it definitely took some time to understand the platform itself and just really understand where those trade-offs were and what was the best way to go.
Yeah. And obviously you had this vision of what you wanted to build and how it was going to serve, the community. Can you give me the details around, what you've built, the impact it's made, for the Look Commission? And, obviously, it's something that it's taken a lot of time and blood, sweat and tears and, commitment to it. So it'd be good to kind of hear what your vision was and how it's kind of transpired.
Yeah, I think we realized as a team that, there's a disease, especially in emerging markets, that
Mm.
is claiming more lives every single year than any other disease. It's not HIV, it's not TB, it's not malaria, it's not COVID-19, it's operational inefficiency. And operational inefficiency, is resulting in, dramatic effects of medications not making it all the way to the patient, of low productivity in healthcare sectors, of commodities closing down emergency wards because the right tools, the right people are not in the right place at the right time. And so you witness up close this tragedy of, really what is available could be producing a much higher value than what is actually being gotten. And we've seen a lot of focus, oftentimes internationally, on resource injection into emerging markets, but we really saw a strong need for resource utilization. And so Luvelo, empowering excellence, is really a vision that we have to not just provide higher quality healthcare service delivery, but how do we capacitate health networks, businesses, nonprofits, everyone in emerging markets with purpose built tools that help coordinate every aspect of the logistics of their organization, from the time you bring a personnel in to the you schedule them, coordinate them, manage every movement of commodities from procurement to distribution, while also caring for the patient experience all the way from registration to, outpatient services, specialty care services, inpatient. So the ability to combine all of those solutions in one platform and really break down barriers that often exist in emerging markets has been our vision. And, we believe that you can save more lives with organizational excellence than you can with healthcare. And, that's where we're really excited about how Luvelo can come alongside teams, in emerging markets and beyond to really capacitate them to better use the resources that are already available. And in doing so, improve health outcomes.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you spoke about obviously, and I know this about obviously you started with using partners, contractors, and the goal was to internalize. And in my view, internalizing is the right kind of way you should build a low code project anyway. But also, I think from your point, it shows, like you said, people are, they can come on site, they can visit, they can kind of have an overall understanding and really fight for the message, right? Kind of work and kind of experience on the ground how it is like for you at Eswatini. How was, it's something that a lot of companies will go through is the whole internalizing, building teams, upskilling. How was that process for you?
Yeah, I think what's been helpful is that we've always, the core like architecture and heartbeat has always been on the ground in Eswatini, in terms of, being with the team members in the field, understanding their challenges. And I think in the process of familiarizing and orienting additional team members, we've used Slack extensively, which has played a huge role in just streamlining communication.
Yeah,
For whatever reason, it's still fairly unique in the industry to have direct access between end users and developers. But one of the things that we've done in every domain, in supply chain and health, in personnel, is we create Slack channels with everyone who's going to be using the apps having direct access to send messages, things they're struggling with, ideas to developers who are also in those same channels. And what you find is in that process, there's not just a knowledge exchange that takes place. There's actually like a synergistic relationship development that happens between your operational teams and your development teams. And I think it can't be understated just how much building those relationships fuels, so much of the innovation and kind of co-creation that takes place as the solution evolves. And so we've used, Slack for, you know, building out best practices, discussing ideas as a team, maintaining visibility across what other developers are working on. But it's allowed us to do that without always having to have a set meeting or, a
yeah,
structured, plan to do that. It just happens organically day in and day out.
yeah. And how do you manage, governance and scalability?
Yeah, so we use a lot of JIRA for ticketing. So while we discuss a lot of things in Slack, there's helpful
Uh-huh.
features that you can just right click on a Slack message, convert it into a JIRA ticket. So anything that goes through our development pipeline gets a JIRA ticket. We go through a code review process, and we have a testing team that's also working with end users and supporting end users. That's also testing all of our solutions at the same time, and so they do a phenomenal job, just identifying, rooting out issues before they make it into production. And then we've also got, some different alerts that we set up. We set up with Ghost Inspector and AWS CloudWatch, just some automated alerts. If, database CPU ever exceeds a certain amount, front end servers exceed certain amounts, they can send us alerts in Slack that we can see real time from a scalability perspective as well. And, some of those things really helped us from a performance tuning perspective, kind of iteratively, improve queries that maybe we saw spikes in CPU from time to time. But, again, it's a very, very collaborative effort, but we do have the structure that's kind of moving through that software development lifecycle of the tickets and the code reviews, testing, and then release.
Yeah. And you mentioned obviously being on the ground, Slack channels where the developers are speaking, that everyone's kind of available and hearing everything, how, what's been the kind of impact for the people outside of the IT team? What's the feedback and, after you've gone through this implementation?
Yeah, I think the fun part about co-creation is that it's everyone's solution, and so there's a
Yeah.
lot of excitement from the team. As they share ideas and you see those come to life very quickly. Then you start to think of more ideas and share ideas, and it just kind of feeds on itself. So, it's a really exciting environment where the team is constantly pushing the needle on solutions for patients, and it's not that every single thing that gets asked, we actually implement or put in our development pipeline, but
Mhm.
just that there's that culture of continually looking for 1% of improvement. And, I just love the way that OutSystems allows us to push 1% better every day. That when you look back, in a year, 1% better every day is 38 times better in a year.
Yeah.
And that has a
Yeah.
profound impact year in and year out on patient care.
Yeah. And, obviously, out the last few years, every conversation involves the two letters AI, and everyone wants to hear about it, what platforms are doing with it. Can you talk me through about, how you're leveraging AI at the Loop Commission?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of talk about it, and for good reason. I think it's the most transformative shift
Yeah.
we've seen in a long time. But I think even from the beginning of Luvelo, our goal has always been how do we reduce the administrative burden of our senior leaders so that they can focus on strategy, tackle the hard challenges, do new things, train the people underneath them. And I think AI opens up, really even more capability, just reduce administrative burden while also improving quality of service delivery. So we've integrated it into some of our procurement solutions, being able to just monitor procurements, quotations. As they go through the review process, you get AI feedback that suggests, is there potentially better market pricing out there in the region? Again, saving you cost during your procurement process. There's abilities to monitor fuel logs and controls and accountability in the healthcare space, is profound implications, I think, moving forward for how we can use AI. But just being able to summarize patient histories, notes, just show warning flags if there's any treatments or diagnosis that maybe there's other things that could be helpful to consider for the providers. And the ability to do that in real time, not in some sort of, review process that would happen later on, really just arms every person on our team with that much more capacity to improve service delivery. And so, I think the leapfrog technology that we're able to use is going to, really just transform, every sector and where people are operating. And it does take a structured process to do that, and it does take redundancy and doing it the right way, which I think OutSystems is allowing us to do. But it will significantly reduce administrative burden while improving quality for patients.
Yeah. Yeah. And, obviously, everything's also talking now about agentic and, agent workbench. Have you looked at agent workbench? Have you got any plans of, using that?
Yeah, we did. And we just, got a chance to set up our ODC environment, now unified with OS 11,
Yeah.
which has been exciting. And just, recently last week created our first, agentic experience. And I think, what was more exciting than anything was just seeing the ability to include OutSystems actions getting triggered from those AI agentic, workflows and agents that are established. And you see everything in the conference and you're like, okay, that looks great. And then until you
Yeah.
can really get behind the scenes and see it working for yourself, you're always a little bit skeptical. But
Yeah.
when we got in there, we're able to create, very quickly some different agents that can start interacting with our existing APIs, scheduling solutions, just asking supply chain, how much of this item do we have in stock? And getting an instant answer from AI. you know, these experiences just, they really changed the way that people will interface with our solutions. But seeing how quickly it was able to be done is is exciting, and it's a little bit addictive. Once you make one, you're immediately thinking of the next one that you can create. So we're looking forward to the future.
Amazing. And, speaking of the conference, you were there and obviously you presented as well. And you touched on the unified platform announcement, and there was other announcements around mentor and vibe coding and agent workbench and things like that. What's your, as a customer, how was those announcements for you? As obviously I think a lot of people going into the conference weren't sure what was coming, right? And so how were those announcements for you? And were they positive? And you've touched on agent workbench, but even mentor with vibe coding, and also the unified platform seems to be a big hit from the people I spoke to in the room after. How was that for you?
Yeah, it was phenomenal. I think what really stood out more than anything probably to us was just that, that the leadership team was listening and was coming with solutions. And I think as much as anything, that means just as much as every solution that was put out there. But the unification of O11 ODC, ourselves as well, we're looking at what does that transition look like? Obviously, with a large factory, over 40
Yeah.
front end apps that we're supporting, thinking about that digital transition can look, overwhelming, but seeing the ability to unify them and kind of a clear strategy where users can go between them, I think, that's going to allow us to move much more quickly into that ODC environment while still having the reliability and legacy of OS 11. And then just even from a training perspective, the ability to have personal editions again in ODC is like a huge part of our future is going to be training up developers, training up many in the region who maybe haven't always had the opportunity to access, different types of high code opportunities. But I think there's amazing potential to accelerate, development and capacity building, that those personal editions really do play a huge role in being able to, really leverage and unlock. So that was, also super exciting to us. And yeah, the all of the AI agentic, we probably expected to see a little bit more of that, but we're
Mm.
excited, especially when we got our hands in it, and it really did work.
Yeah, amazing. And you've been on this journey for a while now, and I like to always kind of ask people, if you were, you've learned a lot, right? Doing this low code journey, right? And if you were to go back and start again based on the lessons you've learned, what would you do differently?
Yeah, we've learned a lot, and I think we are always learning, still learning.
Yeah.
I think, I think some things that went well was just like making sure that we maintained very close alignment with the developers and the end users. Like I think that just making sure that, if you're a developer who's designing warehouse solutions, that you're just in the warehouse, you understand how it works, you can feel the space. That was important. I think as we built solutions, particularly in our front end applications, I think we built service actions, thinking towards ODC from the very beginning, particularly create updates, deletes. I think as we've kind of updated over time, we would have gone even stronger on just using service actions and structures to get data in the front end as well. And, whereas maybe we use aggregates in our front ends a little more frequently, we've since, kind of gone and updated a lot of those applications to just use a little bit more strong definitions between the data layer and the front end layer, which, I think is just, as I mentioned earlier, kind of getting familiar with the platform and
Yeah.
kind of finding that right tension between, what allows you to move quickly while also really positioning yourself best for long-term scalability. So that's one thing, but I think overall it's been an easy thing to go back and kind of iterate over time. And,
Yeah.
of course you learn in every part of the journey, but that was one thing I think that we learned in the process.
Yeah. And for other kind of, business leaders about to adopt low code, start their out systems journey, what would be your advice to them as they start out?
Yeah, I would just say just build as much as you can, and just get your hands in there, build the applications, understand how everything works just from complete scratch, and just build little tests, challenge your assumptions, build crud wrappers in a couple different ways and actually go and assess the performance of those. Go and just build agentic experiences and identify where there's a challenge, where you get stuck. And I think sometimes we can overcomplicate the development process a little bit, but just getting into it and getting your hands involved and just understanding where the challenges are. I think that's just what I would encourage someone starting out. And also just I think there's a huge world out there where we can all, as innovators, as problem solvers, as developers, business leaders, we can all put our heads together and really find ways to serve the underserved, and make a difference in this world. And I think as the tech community, we all have that responsibility, and I think amazing potential that we have to unlock capacity in people. And so I think my encouragement would just be, don't let that go to waste. Really take that opportunity and find partners that you can use to get engaged and just help them accelerate their mission and vision, towards serving other people.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a skill that you can put to good use, right? And giving back, and kind of obviously it's nice kind of working on corporate projects, but these type of life changing projects have a different kind of feel to it when you kind of sit down and think about it.
Yeah, there's no substitute for seeing kids come in your gates that
Yeah.
can't see, seeing people
Yeah.
come in that can't walk, can't breathe, and leaving your gates of your campus dancing, singing, and with a
Yeah.
totally new life ahead of them. And so, I mean, we're just incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be a part of that. It's a huge team that's making all of that possible. But I think just really encourage anyone, when you get up close and you get to, as a developer, see those experiences up close and the impact that it can
Yeah.
have on human lives. That type of transformation is something that's just so exciting to be a part of.
Yeah, that's amazing. And finally, what's next for the Loop Commission, and where does OutSystems fit in? What's the future look like?
Yeah, so we're, Luvelo now, which is we've named the suite of enterprise apps that
Yep.
was initially built for the Loop Commission. Luvelo, 40 interoperable apps. Exciting to start onboarding our first customers, allowing other people in emerging markets and beyond to really utilize this technology and help it, catalyze growth, help it improve their operational efficiencies and excellence. And so we're really excited for what that looks like, to not just be supporting the Loop Commission, but to be unlocking potential and really accelerating improved health outcomes, not just in Eswatini or even Southern Africa, but around the world. And so OutSystems, a huge partner in that. I think the ability that we have to work together to leverage high performance, low
Yep.
code technology, and to be able to scale that at an enterprise level, is really what's next for us as we scale beyond Eswatini and the region. But yeah, we're excited to get it into other customers' hands and just to see the transformation it can have in them, just like we've seen it happen at TLC over the last several years.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to seeing how things evolved, and I think it'd be great to speak again in the future and see how it's gone, and what you've learned from that as well. So I appreciate you taking the time to speak to me.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it, and great to meet you in person at the One Conference for the first time. Great to connect, and thanks a lot.
Appreciate it, Sam. Thank you.